Is there anything you take as a player that you do as a coach now that you just kind of always knew you would do?
I think communicate with the players, let them know where they stand, and tell them the truth. Not sugarcoat it. Guys don't want to have the hard conversation because they're scared to tell the truth, and if you're going to hurt this guy's feeling. So to me, the truth is the most important thing in growth. So if the player's going to grow, he's got to hear the truth.
When I stepped on the ice, I never backed down and I never stayed down.
And I was vicious and I was malicious, and I don't care.
I'm alive. He's a freaking madman. Look at him going to town. That'll be a suspension. That'll be a fine.
Today we welcome our guest, Marty St. Louis. This guy certainly personifies perseverance, stick-to-itiveness, and just plain old hard work. And he earned every inch of ice, every accolade he's got throughout his career. Just amazing what he's done, and it's awesome to have him here with us today. Knuckles and a couple small guys. Awesome.
Yeah, we could have used you on our wing.
Oh, I would have loved it. You
We
kidding
would have
me?
been a little bit taller if you were on our wing, for sure.
You kidding me? Anyway, we'll get going here. Marty, welcome again. Awesome for accepting the invite to come on the show. Actually, you asked me. You said, "Geez, I'd love to come on your show for you to help you out." So I appreciate you coming so much. And I think back, and obviously playing most of my career here in Montreal, my certainly my best years were the years you were happened to be growing up here in Laval and watching the game, and you and your family were all big fans of the Canadiens. You wore number 26 because of my teammate Matt Naslin, who is one of my favorite teammates. What was it like there growing up in the St. Louis household back in the 80s, say hockey night in Canada, Saturday night? What was it like?
Well, I was born in '75, so my dad was a huge Canadian fan. I mean, I start skating at a very young age. Hockey night in Canada every Saturday night. Could be family gathering, whatever it was. We always had the game on, and the uncles were all watching. The aunts were in the kitchen, and the uncles were all in the family room, and the cousins and the kids watching the game. And my dad was an avid Habs fan. So celebrating after every goal, like jumping, and obviously he had some, being a Habs fan for him, had some great years through the '70s. And then you fast forward to the '80s, where now I'm like, 5, 6, 7, 86. I was 11 years old. So there was just so much momentum with the Canadiens and the success that it was easy for me to get attached to the Habs. And all my idols, my first idols, the Guy Lafleur to Matt Naslin. It was easy to fall in love with those guys. Obviously, what Guy did in the league speak for itself. He was such an electrifying player. The blonde hair flying to the wind there, coming up the neutral zone, and his offensive instincts and what he did on that side of the ice was awesome. And then Matt Naslin was just the smallest player on the team, and for me growing up, I was always the smallest player on the team, and so I got attached to him pretty quick and idolized him, and it was fun to grow up in Laval and have the Canadians to look up to, and whether you went on the pond or you play street hockey, the amount of time I was Steve Penny in the net in the street, and the Rick Wamsley and obviously the Patrick Waugh. I think at some point I might have been Doug Sotart too. So it was a big part of our lives.
Well, it certainly was. And growing up, you're playing hockey in Quebec, and the passion for the game here is like nowhere else I've been. And looking at your career and having to deal with, I guess, and being that small a player. I've talked to Tim about this a few times, but what was that like? Dealing with that, like with every coach. I'm sure it come up somewhere with every coach. And how did you battle through that? I got to hear this again. I know your mom apparently said, "You go show him, Marty," and would give your parents would give you that confidence. But how was it on you personally having to deal with that?
It wasn't a big deal in my at home. Like I loved the game so much. I was happy to play. If I didn't make the top team, it was never a big deal. My parents knew that I loved the game, and they never thought that I'd play in the NHL. So it wasn't the end goal for them. So there was no pressure in the household of or disappointment. They just knew how much I loved the game, and that's why my mom was always like, "Don't worry, you'll just show them. Don't worry about it. It's all good." And of course, I was disappointed not making the top teams. First year Pee Wee, I didn't make the top team, and I went to play double B, and but I think I don't know if my coaches cut me for my size, or maybe I just wasn't good enough at that point in time. But my passion just kind of helped me get through that without really any kind of frustration. Was it deep down a source of motivation? Absolutely. But I can't say I was ever like really frustrated that I was not looked at, I guess, because of my size. I just loved the game. I just wanted to play, and I knew I was going to be on a team.
Yeah, no, I was similar too. I didn't really have at home any pressure on that. Now, but did you think like at what age were you? I mean, were you always like I'm going to play in the NHL like mentally, or did you like like realistically for me, I played junior varsity high school my freshman year in high school, and I there was never a doubt, there was never a thought in my mind that I was going to play in the NHL then. I mean, did you have that belief? Like, or were you trying to just to get to college?
Yeah, I think it was gradual. It was always a dream, like
Yep.
uh, growing up, it was a dream to play in the NHL. But for me, like I remember, like if you got to play midget AAA at 16 in my area, and that was kind of a big deal. And my goal was to get on that team, and I did. And then from there on, it was either you went to play major junior or went to play college. And based on the way the game was at that time, it wasn't very welcoming for a smaller player. And my dad had through friends found out about the NCAA route, and so I focused on that. So for me, it was like trying to make the next level. Like I guess like short term goals. And when I got to college, my freshman year as a true freshman, and back then there was a lot more true freshmen than now. But I was competing against 20, 21-year-old, 22-year-olds. My freshman year, I had a really good year against older players, bigger guys. And at that point on, I'm like, okay. Then you start seeing college guys signing into the NHL, and you're like, start comparing. Well, if he can get a contract, I'm sure if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'll get an opportunity. So it kind of opened my eyes the first couple of years of college that, hey, this, you know, I'm not just going to get an education out of this. I think I can play some hockey.
So you started thinking you might have that possibility of playing the NHL, and you certainly you ripped it up in college. You put the numbers up, no question about it. Um, and then comes a draft. You don't get drafted. Were you? Were you anticipating being drafted? And when?
No,
No, you weren't.
yeah, for me, it was my draft year was the summer before going to college. And after my freshman year, there was a chance as an overage I might get drafted, and I didn't. But I wasn't expected that. I was very comfortable in the fact that I'm going to have to go through the back door. And, I felt like it was a better situation for me because if I'm not drafted, I am a free agent and I might have a few more teams to pick from. And that was in the back of my mind. Honestly, the biggest turnaround, not the turnaround, but the huge confident boost that I got was my junior year at Christmas time, 20 years old maybe. I went to play for Team Canada in the Spengler Cup. They brought four college guys, And it was me, Jamal Myers, Dan McGillis, a couple other guys, goalie from Maine, I think Blair Allison maybe, and then another Canadian college kid. And I went there and I played with a lot of ex NHL guys that were playing in Europe. It was Dan Daou, it was Gilles
Yeah.
Thibodeau, it was Stéphane Lebeau, it was Mike Richard. There was a lot of guys that played. Claude Vilgrain was on that team. There was a lot of guys that had played in the NHL, and now I go play against pros. And I did well. We won the tournament, and I did well. And I was such a confident boost that, wow, okay, if I can play with those guys at 20, I'm on the right path here. And I came back, and I was having a good year, but I came back, and I was at another level because of that tournament. And just felt like, and it's funny because after my junior year, I had couple offers to turn pro, and I turned it down. I went back to college. I wanted to graduate, and I felt that if I could get offers after my junior year, I'll probably get offer after my senior year. And unfortunately, I had zero offer after my senior year. I think 4 years in that league at college was almost. I could have used a Chris Nyland on my line in college.
It's unbelievable. No offers at all.
No, not after my senior year. I had no offers, and
It's incredible.
a big part of it is on me though, because I went from having 85 points my junior year to maybe 65 my senior year. I think I had more PIMs,
Yeah,
Chris.
you had 65 PIMs and 60 points your senior
Yeah,
year.
exactly. So it was a big drop in production. There was a lot of frustration. Every game I played, guys were hacking, whacking, holding, trying to take my head off, and I got frustrated. I think it was just one too many years in that league because you couldn't really protect yourself. You didn't have guys that couldn't really protect you, and so I definitely take ownership on that. And so I ended up signing in Cleveland Lumberjack in the IHL, and I played with some ex NHL guys there, which was a lot of fun.
How'd you like that Spangler Cup? It's funny because you played in it, and that was like kind of like you're okay. Then you jump started. You're like it got you to believe like, hey, I can go.
Yeah.
I played in it, and I was like, I'm retiring pretty soon here. Like I was like towards, I played in Switzerland at the end of my career, and we were one of the teams that was in it. But did you like? I mean, that thing was awesome.
It was a great tournament, and I actually got to go back. So in the lockout in 04, 05, I was playing in Lausanne for a few months, and Davos signed me. Me, Joe Thornton, Rick Nash. Joe was already playing. I think Nasher was already playing in Davos too, and they signed me. So I joined Davos for that weekend for that week tournament, and we won it. It was one of my favorite hockey experience, that Davos tournament.
And Joe Thornton. He met his wife there, right? Like she's from.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and then what did you think of the Swiss league? I try to explain it to people, and it's like, man, it's the transit. I mean, I don't know how the I don't
it was different hockey. There's
Yeah.
The rules are a little different. It's a lot like basketball, a little bit, a lot of pick and roll, and it's different. But I mean, quality of life was awesome.
Oh,
The people
yeah.
were great. The hockey was different than what I was used to, but I learned to adapt.
So that going from Lausanne back to Cleveland, though, you start in Cleveland, you sign with them, and then how does the Flames come about? How do you end up with the Flames?
Yeah, so I signed with Cleveland. So my childhood friend, Eric Perrin, was my centerman for 13 years. He played in the NHL too, and he ended up having a heck of a career. And spent a lot of times in Finland. He's the all-time leading scorer for imports in Finland. Great league. And we both signed in Cleveland together. So he was my centerman, and we were playing on the second line. And then Brad Lauer, who coached in Edmonton, he coaches in Edmonton now, the junior team. Lauer got hurt, and Brett Harkins was a number one center. Brett was a great playmaker. He saw the ice really well, very creative. So I jumped up on the first line with Brett, and it got me to the All-Star game, and I scored 3 at the All-Star game. And then the next day I signed with Calgary, and I went to their farm team to finish the season.
So you go right there, you go to the farm team. You played a couple years there with the Flames, then getting called up in 99 You have 56 games, and then it's on. How does Tampa happen? So you make your way in Calgary, but how does Tampa happen?
Well, it's a long story, but and I don't mind diving into it because I think it'll bring a little clarity to why things ended up the way it did. I signed with Calgary my first year pro, midway through, finished the season with the Flames. We go to the Calder Cup final. The Flames are out of the playoffs, so they follow us around. I led the team in scoring through the playoffs. We lost to Philly, but because they were following us around, they saw me every day. It gave me a leg up on making the team out of camp the following year. So I make the team out of camp. My first two games with Calgary is in Japan in '98 to promote the Nagano Olympics. We play San Jose. I'm on Theo Fleury and Andrew Castle's line, and I looking back on it, like skill wise, talent wise, I was ready for the NHL, but mentally I was not. I every time it took me a while because I would put the NHL on such a pedestal, and I would sell myself short mentally. I feel that's why it took me a while to get going. So I mean, I played the first 11 game. Maybe I was in and out of the lineup. I had two games with Castle and Fleury. Didn't do very well, and I was in the minors a month later, and I got a concussion in the minors. I only played 50 games that year in the minors. Still led the team in scoring in the AHL, and the following year I show up to camp. Now my second camp, one of the first cuts, and I'm upset. And this is the year that the expansion Minnesota Columbus is coming in. So when I left camp, I'm upset and one of the first cut, and I told them to not call me up the rest of the year because I wanted a full season in the American League. And little like, I guess I don't know if it's confident, it's arrogant, whatever it is, but I told them just don't call me up. I want a full year. I'll lead the league and I'll be out of your way. And the first 15 games of the season, I got 26 points in the minors. I'm leading the league, and they called me up, and I never went back. And they brought me up and on a more of a check and roll, killing penalties. And I think it was great for me to learn because I had never really focused on that side of the game my whole life. And I love Brian Sutter. He was great. He gave me a role. I didn't produce a lot, but I felt like the last 2 months I was coming on. I was getting my reps at that level. I was feeling comfortable. I was catching the pedestal that I was putting the NHL on, and so I had a lot of momentum finishing the season, bettering my faith, moving up the lineup a little bit, getting more responsibility. But then everybody gets fired. Everybody got fired at the end. GM, coach, everyone, and I was a no name with no stats, 5'8".
Mm-hmm.
So they let me go, and that's how I ended up in Tampa. And I went to Tampa um, because I felt that I was probably the team that had the best chance at cracking the lineup. It wasn't a very good team at the time. So I went to Tampa with a mindset of, you're going to the American League. Because in the American League, I played my game. So I went to Tampa and camp in the mindset that I'm in the American League and don't worry about, there was no like superstar there. And I had a really good camp. But again, first game of the season, Fort Line. I still have the game sheet, I in my office because I played a minute 52 my first game in Tampa. 1 minute 52. I didn't make many mistakes in that game. So, the first 20 games it was in and out of lineup, and I finally had enough, and I talked to Steve Ludzig at the time, and I was a coach, and I was like, Ludsy, like I just want you to know that I can play in your top three line and I can help you. I just want you to know that I know that. So I kind of threw him the ball, and he eventually started giving it to me, and I just kind of gradually like took off. And I mean, I scored my first goal my first year. I think it was the 20th game of the season, and I started playing more, and I finished with 18 that year. So I felt pretty good about it. And Torts took over halfway through that season. And it's not like he gave me the power play time or anything, but I was kind of solidified role on the third line to finish the season. And Torts told me that that exit meeting that if I take care of myself this summer, come in shape, he's going to give me a chance in the top six. And I mean that was just fuel to my fire, and I just never looked back.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say this is for me. This is such an amazing story, just because it kind of relates a little bit. And I remember watching you in college and being, I was telling Chris earlier, like you were paving that way. And I know there's been small guys in the league before, but just at the time for me in college, I saw you when you guys won the cup, and just kind of paving that way for the little guys. And I went to Finland after college for 2 years. I was located in Helsinki, and it just so happened to be like, that's where like a lot of these scouts were going to watch. Tuukka Rask was in the league, and then I ended up signing with Toronto, played a few games, but I want to bring up somebody, but I got traded from Toronto to Atlanta, and I was thrown in this trade. It was like Pavel Kabina and what, and then they just threw me in it, and it was because of Rick Dudley, and Rick Dudley believed that I could play, and I ended up playing like 50 games the next year, and then they all got fired. We got sold to Winnipeg. But what does he mean to you? Because I know he has something to do with you, and for me that's such an amazing thing. And he was great for me. I didn't play obviously nearly as long as you did in the NHL, but I got to play, and he was one of the reasons why.
Yeah, Duds brought me to Tampa. Like, Duds, you know, just a great hockey guy, great person, and I think he watched a lot of hockey, and he had tracked me for many years now, and he took a flyer on me, but he felt like I had my body of work for the last 3-4 years deserve a flyer, and I think that I always say I'm thankful. I don't think without Rick Dudley, I don't know if I'm talking to you guys today. I don't know if where I am today, and I think we all at some point in time need somebody to reach down and grab you and lay a hand and pull you out of the water, I guess. And Duds was that guy for me.
Yeah. Well, Duds certainly has that reputation, no question about it. And so Duds gets you to Tampa, and you end up playing for Tortorella. Now, I know that's a special relationship because John, unfairly at times, I believe, he gets much maligned when you look at, some of the situations that happened when he was in Columbus and in Tampa. And I like that old school coaching, but how was that for you with Torts? Did it take you a while to kind of work your way in there with him? Was he as demanding? Was he fair with you? What was that relationship like?
Yeah, to me, Torts, I compare him to a tough dad, But like I grew up in a household of rules and accountability, and demanding and respectful, and the values that Torts like lives by, like it is the same values that I grew up with. For me, it was easy.
Yeah,
Me and Torts had we had some battles, but we all wanted the same thing. We wanted, he wanted the best for me. I wanted the best for myself, and sometime, like as a kid, you don't know what's the best for yourself.
yeah,
You need somebody to guide you and push you, and that's what he did. And I was used to that, as the way I was brought up, and to this day, my dad is the guy I respect the most on the earth, even if he was hard on me at times. And you talk to a lot of guys that had torts, they might have not like him all the time, but they look back on what they did, what he did for them, and they're like, wow, okay, it makes a lot of sense now that those guys are older, they have their own kids. So, Torts has maybe a, a misleading reputation
yeah,
because you see the stuff in the media, and when he's fiery and everything, and you think he's like that every day all day. Torts is an unbelievable human and a guy that shows a lot of love too. I would say that Torts is very fair, but what is fair, right? What's the definition of fair? Like, it's not always good for me, but what is fair? He's coaching a team, he's not just coaching me. So I look back on it, and it couldn't have been a better situation for me to land with a guy like Torts. He was demanding, but he was fair.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And like I say, he's much maligned, and I certainly like that old school style of coaching that he had. No question about it. I think sometimes we can, looking at it from the outside, it looks like sometimes guys are pampered and babied, and for someone who didn't grow up in that and didn't play in that my times in the NHL. It's frustrating to watch, put it that way. And I just like his style. You talk about, I read something where you talked about exposing, not being ready to say coach in the NHL at this point. A lot of people said, where did Marty coach before here? He had a little stint in Columbus as a consultant. You were offered a job in the American League by Jeff Gordon when with the Rangers, and you end up behind the bench for the Montreal Canadiens. You said you wouldn't take the job. You wouldn't expose yourself to it if you weren't ready. How did you get ready for that job, if you can tell us?
Well, I feel my whole career in the NHL was getting me one step closer to that job. I played till I was 40. Um, I played with some great young players while I was in my 30s. I can tell you that I was coaching a lot of them. I've played for different coaches, different style, different system. There was a lot of, and I was exposed to a lot of information. So how do you measure experience? What's experience? Is it calling the lines? Is it is it running a meeting? Um, I don't know how you measure experience, but I know I have a lot of experience. And then in hockey, and then my last 7 years, I've coached anywhere from 6-year-olds to 17-year-olds, and I've gone through the development side of thing and developing athletes, hockey players, and human. I guess I'm a true believer that as a coach in any sports, your number one priority is develop good human, and hopefully they grasp and they get better at the sport at the same time. But it's got to be in that order in my mind. Uh, and I watch a lot of hockey. I think that thing of Columbus, that stint I had there was great to go back into an NHL dressing room, be on the ice and practice, and just, I guess, being on the other side of things, see how things work, from a coach's perspective, the meetings and whatnot. Um, Watching hockey, I'm take a lot of notes, and to me, hockey is hockey. Yeah, the NHL is the highest level, but the fundamentals of hockey to me are the same everywhere. And the one thing I did that really helped me in my mind too is I did a lot of speaking engagement, talking to companies about leadership and motivational stuff, work ethic. Uh, so public speaking the last 7 years has helped me, to be in this position as well.
Is there anything you've experienced as a player that I don't even know the best way to ask this, but like as a player, is there anything you experienced that you're like, if I ever become a coach, that's one thing I'm not going to do. Like what I mean. You know what I mean. Like where a
Uh,
coach, like I've had many coaches, and they're like, they're bullshitting you, right? Like they're like, oh, it's a numbers thing, this and that. It's like if I'm ever a coach, I'm never gonna say this fucking numbers thing. But is there anything like you kind of live by internally? Like what is your coaching style? I guess too is another question. But like, yeah, is there anything you take as a player that you do as a coach now that you just kind of always knew you would do?
I think communicate with the players, let them know where they stand, and tell them the truth. Not sugarcoat it. Guys don't want to have the hard conversation because they're scared to tell the truth, and if you're going to hurt this guy's feeling. So to me, the truth is the most important thing in growth. So if the player's going to grow, he's got to hear the truth. And sometimes it is a numbers game. Sometimes it's not
Yeah.
fair. Sometimes you're dealing with a cap now and all that. But I think it's important for so many years I felt like Uh, you know, I wish there was more communication. Where there's a plan, right? This is where you're at, and this is where we need you to go. How are we going to get you there? Here's what I think. Should do this, that, whatever. Work on this, that, and that, and then we'll get you there. And I don't think there was enough of that. And I think now so many more resources to help players, but it's what are you looking at? What are you looking at in the player? What are the flaws, and how do we get to fix that and get him to maximize his potential? And I feel that that's one of the things I think that with my experience in the game in the trenches and played in so many situations and actually like being an American League guy, be a call up, be a guy in the stand, be a fourth line guy, be a third line guy, be an all star. Like I feel like I know exactly how my guys think, no matter where they are on my bench. I've been through that, so I feel like for me, I want to communicate because it's not the same pressure for even an all star. You think you leave the all star alone? Like the all star has a lot of different expectation and pressure than the guy in the third, fourth line. But everybody on your bench has to feel a little bit better about themselves, so that they play better. So so for me to go back to your question is it's the constant communication, and sometimes it's not always communicating with words. It's action, but at least there's communication.
I read one piece where you talked about the battles and the players experiencing not only on the ice, in the locker room, and that battle internally. So you come into a situation like the Canadians were, and I'm not here to disparage any other coaches or players or anything, but you look at the situation you step into. Before you got here, this team was totally lost. They did not look like they were playing for the coach. They were not involved. They were unenthused. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. You came in, and it seemed the attitude seemed to change right away. It's, of course, everybody wants to impress the new guy, but how were you able to come in and you know in such a short time get their attention? Because it was no more evident with a guy like Cole Caulfield, who only had one goal or two goals when you got here. He ends up with 21 the end of the season. How did you free these guys up? I guess I'm trying to get at, because it seemed like they got freed up or something.
Yeah, I mean, my own experience, when things don't go well for a team or if you're having a bad year as a player, the one thing you can't wait for is to hit that reset button and start over. And I think a new coach does that. When you bring a new coach, reset button. You have a bad year, playoff starts, reset button. Year is over, reset button for the next year. There's so many time or opportunity maybe where you can hit the reset button, and I think that's all we did. I came there, we just got a reset button and talked a lot about enthusiasm. There's no way that we can get better here down the stretch and feel good about ourselves unless we bring enthusiasm to the game, to practice, whatever it is. And to me, the most important day in this league, whether you win or lose, it's always the next day. So a lot of guys I felt were carrying a lot of baggage because of the year that they were having collectively and individually. And once we hit the reset button, I asked them to leave all the negative stuff at home. If you need to call your dad or talk to your wife, leave it at home. The next day, we're coming here. We're going to win the day, and we're going to have fun. And we just started playing, and it's not like of course there's a lot of things that I want to address as a team, and your job as a coach is you have to convince them why we're going to play a certain way. You can't just say we're going to do this, do that, and you have to build it. You can't just give them the manual and say you got to read this by tomorrow. You go one chapter at a time, and once you feel you got the first chapter grasped, and you move on to the next one. I feel we did that. I didn't overcoach. I just tried to point out a few key points, and then once I felt we were good with those, we move on to the next thing. And the guy probably played a little more free that way. But to me, the biggest piece it was just being able to hit the reset button. I think any coach that came in there, they're going to get that reset button, and hopefully, start feeling good about themselves. But you can't get any of that unless you bring some enthusiasm.
He gave all optional practices too. That was a
Yeah,
huge.
yeah. So you say you hit the reset button, which I get, which is awesome. And then how do you maximize your time, I guess, trying to get that point across to this team that, I see a lot of coaches that come in, they put the trap in right away. We got the trap, we're playing the trap. Um, uh, uh, and you mentioned overcoaching. That's what I wanted to say. What is to you overcoaching? How were you overcoached when you played in the NHL?
I mean, I know when I got to be when I just first came in the league, I was a pleaser. Like, you tell me to be here, I'll be there. You took some of my instinct away, and eventually I worked myself to uh, to have a long enough leash, I guess, where I could play more with my instinct, and a little more freedom. And I think it's important every player that have a little bit of that. And now, does that mean that there's no structure? No, there is structure, but there's so many ways that you can play the game. And as a coach, is to teach and to get everyone on the same page. Because you have five guys on the ice. If there's one guy that's out to lunch, there's a study about that. There's one guy that's out to lunch that's not doing uh, offense or defense. Your productivity goes down like to 35%. So as a coach is to make sure that we're all working together on both sides of the puck. But there's so many ways to do that. So many ways to play D zone. There's so many ways to to forecheck. So to me, it's trying to get everyone on the same page, and then make if you feel like your team is not quite getting it or responding, you make a few like slight adjustment to make sure it's easier to be on the same page, and you grow from that. But the yeah, I mean, systems are part of the game. I rather talk about concepts and structure than system. I feel system, you're boxing players, and you can do this, you can't do that, and you're taking some of the reads away that I like to have. And there's time and a place where there's no read to be made. We're going north. There's time on the clock. There's puck management. There's score in the game. But the in between, the most of the game, I want my players to play with concept oriented together, but definitely with some structure, but not so boxed in until you can only do that.
Yeah, no, and I that word teach is, I think, such a, there is a difference between coaching and teaching. And if you could do both, like one of my best coaches was, I only had him for a little bit, was Craig Ramsey. He was the head coach in Atlanta, and he would,
I had Rammer.
yeah, oh yeah, that's right.
He was the assistant coach in Tampa.
Okay, well, him and he must have came with Duds then. That makes
Love
sense.
Rammer.
Yeah, I mean, he would hold me after practice and teach me within, within the coaching. And I think there is a difference between the two. I mean, I'm kind of rambling on about it, but that word teach is such a key word to, at least for me, what I thought my best coaches were ones that, you got Mike Keenan, who's just like yelling and telling you your wife's ugly, to get you to play to play hard. Like those days, but then you got, there was a few coaches I had that really did both really well.
Yeah.
And I thought those were
Yeah, I
my,
think yeah, I think overall the best coaches are the one that can teach and coach, because you're right, it's different, and I have coaches that are really good coach, not great teachers, and I had the opposite.
yeah.
So I strive to keep getting better at teaching, at delivering my message, and also like coaching. The coaching, is the bench decision, is there's a lot of different things. It has nothing to do with teaching.
When you talk about concepts, I guess, obviously growing up in that structure and those systems, playing the trap. I remember when it was invoked here in Montreal when back in the 80s, and it was very structured and it was demanding, and as far as the discipline of staying within that system and not really straying from that. When you were a player, How did you feel when you got matched up against? And how'd you battle around that? And as a coach, do you believe in that? Matching against certain guys. You want to go against that offensive line. You want to shut them down. You gotta match. And how does that affect, the rest of the bench when you have to do that, or do you?
Yeah, I mean, I think like with the era you came in and even like some of the you know years that I played, I feel like the NHL was very playing not to lose. Forget the Edmonton Oilers of the '80s, but just in general, they got to a certain point in time where it was limiting the mistakes and playing not to lose. And now the NHL has moved a little bit into playing to win, and the teams that can balance that the best, they're the most dangerous one. They can do it more consistently. They have a good gauge of the risk and reward that they make in their play. What are they giving up, with the decision they make? Okay. I'm gonna risk to go on a 2-on-1, but if it doesn't work, I'm giving up a 3-on-3 the other way. I'll take that all day. So, and I think there's more of that in the league now, and I think that's why the league is more fun to watch. Uh, and but In terms of matchup, I mean, I feel like you have an idea of and it varies from team to team, and you have an idea of who you have to look out for. And I think it's hard to just have one line take care of that. I think it's collectively, but I think you have to make sure as a coach you have the right people on the ice to protect against the other team's best players. For me personally, I love the matchup. I love to go on the road and knowing I'm playing against you know uh, Madden, Pandolfo, Stevens, Niedermeyer. Like I used to love that. And Just a challenge. Even playing against Bergeron for the Bruins is a challenge. And at home, I didn't expect my coach to take me away from that. I wanted, like, come on, let's go head on. I wanted that competition. I wanted that challenge. So, I think it's a balance, but it's hard to ask to one line because so many things happen during the game. The other line stays on the ice for a minute 15. Your line comes off after 45. There's still a 30-second gap there you have to be careful with. So, you plan accordingly and you try to get the right, the matchup as much as you can where you don't expose yourself.
Is there any players you actually did hate playing against, like that just kind of you struggled mentally, I guess, or however you want to say it? But you said you loved playing against the guys. I hated it, so.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah. No, I can't say that. Even like Chara, people would think that I would not like playing against, but Chara was too big, and I
he
bet you
was
Chara
big.
would say that he didn't like playing against me because I was too small for him.
Yeah.
Like Chara was, I could get underneath him. He was he wasn't some, and obviously like he's got a long stick. There's a big triangle there. Like so I was able to maneuver. Through a big guy like that has a lot of holes for a little guy. So, but every now and then I got caught in the train tracks, and yeah, that hurt. But yeah, it was fun. He was great to play against. He was a competitor, but he was an honest player, so it was good.
Marty, winning the Stanley Cup for you, obviously, in Tampa. How, when you look at that trophy, to win that trophy and having won it, do you think it's the most, and you haven't played the other sports, I get it, but do you think it's the most difficult trophy to win in sport?
Absolutely. You play 82 games. You got to find a way to stay healthy, and you have to find a way to have energy to get on a 2-month ride again. And through that, and I mean, I feel like the time we won it in '04 was kind of the last gladiators years, I guess, because
Yeah.
they changed the rules. And I love that era. Like it was hack and whack in the playoff. You knew it was going to be war, and I loved it.
What'd you do with the cup? What'd you do? What was your day with the cup?
Well, I took it to University of Vermont, had a big party there, and I took it to my hometown too.
So winning that cup. And again, it's awesome to have that feather in your cap, no question about it. Now, as a coach trying to do that, um, if you could, I guess, build that consummate team, you certainly need the offense, some top two lines, but do you believe you have to be, like a lot of people, a big, heavy team to win the Stanley Cup?
I think it's part of it. I mean, I don't think you need to, playing heavy. And yeah, if you're big, it probably helps playing heavy. But like, what are you giving up if you're just big? Are you giving up speed? Because you're going to need that too. To me, it's a balance. It's a style of play and the balance. But you can't. I know it's a copycat league, but you got to make sure if you're going to copycat a team, like you better be a real copycat, because you can't just be big because the team was big. If your guys are big but they can't move well, they don't make high end plays, or poise. They don't have poise. There's so many things that you need to be a successful team. Yeah, it'd be great if if you have big guys with poise that can fly. But I think it's not realistic to think that you're going to have 12 fours like that. So I think it's a balance, but there's a style of play that can help you to play a little heavier, and having your guys compete. Because to me, the compete is probably the most important thing to survive in this league and to be successful and to win. But you know, the compete factor, has to be in line with some kind of intelligence in what they do on the ice and where they go and why they go there. So because working hard to me only gets you sweaty. There's got to be some intelligence behind it and purpose to why you're doing things a certain way. But physicality and heaviness is a big part of winning.
So you're here in Montreal, obviously, and over the years, players have come here and have not produced or had a difficult time to play in the fishbowl that it is, the pressure of this city. How's that pressure for you as a coach? And maybe looking at players dealing with that pressure, how can you help them to maybe manage that better or deal with that better? Because it's not an easy place to play or coach.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's communicating with them. Talking to them. Often, see where they're at, how they're doing. And players put pressure on themselves regardless. I think they probably they're gonna feel some external pressure, but the pressure that is the most damaging for a player is probably the internal one. So it's how they manage, they process the external one. Someone that gets a little bit heavier on their own internal one. But I think it all starts when, I went into every year with pressure. I was playing in Tampa and I felt I had pressure because I had my own expectation. We only had three writers in the room.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest pressure that players put on themselves is the internal one. And now for me as a coach, is try to help them manage that. And if I feel there's some external stuff that's creeping into their own internal one, then I have to manage that too. And as a coach, to me, I'm probably gonna be the same as a player. I'm gonna go into every year with expectation and create short term goals and try to meet those. But the expectations that have to be realistic. In my own head, just so I manage my own pressure.
Do you have the same nerves as a player and a coach? Are they the same? Are they a little different?
A little the same. I love it. Like just right before the game, walking on the bench, like
Mhm.
it's
That's
fun.
awesome,
Fun,
because
fun.
that's the I could say,
It's
like, for me, that's I miss that. I miss being nervous.
Yeah,
I
the
miss.
trenches.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Good for you.
for sure. Love the trenches.
Yeah, I got to tell you, for myself, and I know the alumni when you were hired, and Kent and Jeff Gorton here now, and this team taking a new direction. The evening we spent together with some of the alumni was awesome. And for you as a kid growing up here, being fans of the Canadians and being able to see some of those guys in the room and just, again, you're a Hall of Famer, but still to see some of those guys and relive those childhood memories must have been kind of nice for you, no?
Yeah, no. To be honest, Chris, it was one of my favorite. thing about being the head coach of the Canadians is getting a chance to see some of you guys sometime. Like, I grew up watching you guys play. You guys were my idols. And I can't believe I get to shake your hand and when I'm around you guys, and I can talk. When I'm around you guys, I just want to listen. I
Yeah.
want to listen to the stories. I love it. Like, you played hard, Chris, and you earned every shift you got. And it was so fun to actually get to know you now and get to know the person, not just the player and the warrior that you were. But, the alumni and the ex-players are, I think, what makes the Canadians special. And the fact that I got it, inside the rope look at that is a blessing and an honor for me.
Yeah, it's so cool, and it was nice to see, obviously, you and your dad together at, although a difficult time, but Guy's funeral, and the number of people that came and showed up for Guy was awesome. But to see you there with your dad, it touched me because I just lost my dad. My dad was became such a huge Canadians fan after being a Bruins fan his whole life. But to see you with your dad there at the church was just awesome,
Yeah,
and
no, there's
you got to
nothing
be so
better. I mean,
proud of you, right?
yeah, I mean, to me, like your dad, is your first best friend. That's all I can think of, and I hope that's what it is for a lot of people. And I think your mom is your first love,
No,
and so losing a dad, best friend, it's got to be hard. I lost my mom. It was difficult, but I think it was obviously Guy played a big part in my dad's, hockey experience and being a Habs fan and watching him. But also when my mom passed, Guy came to my mom's funeral. So my dad wanted to make sure that,
yeah, that's
he asked
awesome.
me, is it okay if I come? I said, absolutely, let's go. He wanted to pay his respect again. And not just for him coming to my mom's funeral, but for Guy being the player and the human that he was for the whole province and just the hockey world.
That's
Do you
so
do you
cool.
talk to would you talk to your dad like after every game? That's something I did.
Every game.
Every game.
Oh yeah,
Even
talk to
today.
my
What
dad
about
after
as a
every game.
coach now? Do you talk to him after games as a coach?
Uh, I mean, he comes to all the Montreal at home.
Awesome.
Yeah, on the road depends where we are, but probably not as much. But if I don't call him the night before, night of the game after, I'll call him the next day. But when I played, I just wanted to hear what he had to say. But my dad was never negative. He just would say, it wasn't one of you. My dad had a philosophy. He was like, hey, you're gonna play 50% of the game the way you're supposed to. You're gonna play 25% well above your capability, and you're gonna play 25% below your capability. So he would tell me which bucket my game was in. but but he wasn't. He was never critical.
It's funny. I had Jacques Lemaire, who was certainly just an awesome mentor for me and a guy who helped me so much. But he used to he'd come to me after the game. He'd say, "How do you think you played?" And as a player, sometimes um, I think your view can be a bit skewed because we don't want to be too self-critical at times. And I'd say, "I thought I was pretty good tonight." He said, "Pretty good." He said, "Listen, be honest with yourself." And I said, "All right, I wasn't good. I didn't have a good game." And he said, "Listen, it's going to happen." He said, "But I'm only going to let it happen to you one time every 10 games. You can have one of those games every 10." So that's like 8 games. You can have 8 stinkers during the season. When I thought of it, I thought it was pretty demanding, but when after getting through that season and looking back at it, it was the best advice I could have had. It drove me more. It put me on my toes more. He was an incredible coach for me that way.
Yeah, well, I think Chris, if you self-assess well, you probably only have one every 10. The
Yeah,
problem is not everybody self-assess well. And self-assess is, like I was telling earlier, the truth. The truth is what helps you grow.
yeah.
Self-assess. If you don't have truth in your self-assess, you're not going to grow much. So self-assess is a big part of growing as a player and staying consistent.
There's no question about it. Listen, you've been so generous with your time, and I appreciate you taking the time today. I have one more for you that our producer Barry always wants to
And
ask.
I have a
Yeah.
couple, just
Well,
two.
you,
And we
you
apologize for
just
this,
sit tight.
Marty.
We're
This
gonna
is like
apologize already.
we're trying to really get
I just want to say one thing before you say that, though. Marty, I always wanted to be a coach, and I'm being sincere. Everything you have said is exactly what I've always felt. of the idea.
Said that. He said that last guest too.
So I'm on the right track. So I'm on the right track.
You're on the
Yeah.
right track. No,
Well,
but
you could.
seriously, my dad talked me out of it because he said I was a shitty football player, and he told me I wasn't going to make any money. So
He wa-
All right, hit the mute button.
yeah. All right. Cut.
Here's the question that producer Barry always wants us to ask, and we'll ask it. What is the first sentence of your hockey eulogy? Someone's writing you a hockey eulogy. You are writing your own. What's that first sentence?
Like his mother said, he would show them.
There you go. That's awesome, right?
That is awesome.
Mother said, show them all, and you did show them all. There's no question about it. The career you had, just incredible what you did. Honestly, when I look at your career, a lot of guys are blessed with talent. I get it, but the drive, the stick to itiveness that you had, it was incredible to see what you achieved in your career and to get to the Hall of Fame. Like you earned every inch, every accolade. You earned
And you
it.
gave guys like me, there's a legacy there. You gave guys like me hope, and that patience is. I mean, to hear your story, to hear what you had to climb, and then even get in the NHL, put it on a pedestal, and just kind of play out that third, fourth line until they finally, put me in the top six where I'm supposed to be. And, now I'm a Hall of Famer. I just think it's an incredible story and journey and that I appreciate.
Yeah,
And
I said I appreciate the kind words, but like if anybody thinks that I did all this because of talent, they don't know anything about me.
No.
It's not like talent. Like did I have abilities? Absolutely. There probably one thing that I was probably better than like anybody, and I will challenge that, is I was better at getting better.
There you go.
Than everybody. And that's an art, and that's work, and that's like observation and self-assessment. It's all that, because everybody has abilities, some better than others. But if you're really good at improving your abilities, you're going to get to where you want. And self-assess is step one.
Well, there's no question you did that. And Barry, do you have anything else before we let Marty go?
I have one other question, but
okay. What is it?
If these are people who are not playing anymore, because you're in a position now, so you can't do it with people playing, but people that are not playing anymore, and you could pick and not yourself too, you could pick your top line. Who are the guys you'd put on your top line?
Without me, I'm coaching.
You're coaching. You could pick from any player that's not playing.
And defenseman, and so 2D, a goalie, and the top line.
Goalie and three forwards.
Okay. Definitely Merrill Lemieux up the middle.
There you go.
I'd probably have Guy Lafleur on the right wing. Probably Mats Nazen on the left, actually.
Ooh, there you go. I love that.
Mats would give the puck. Mats would distribute to Mario and Guy. He'd get out of the way when it's time.
He would go in the corner, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He'll win battles and win pucks. On the back end, probably Bobby Orr. There's so many great players.
Right.
Tough not to like Makar right now. But that'd be. I don't know who would stay back. Bobby and Carol.
Who would play defense?
I know. Yeah, you know what? I feel very comfortable in saying, like, I know it's different era, but I would go probably like maybe I have Victor Hedman play the right side with Bobby Orr. But Hetty's. I'm really happy the way he's turned out to be, and not shocked. Great kid, and I just love his size, and he can defend. And I think he would let Bobby do his thing, and Hetty could protect the fort and defend well.
Now, what happens if they're both up the ice helping those three forwards? Who's going to stop the puck?
Probably Mats is staying back.
No, who's going to stop the puck?
Oh, yeah, who's going to stop the puck? Who's going to stop the puck? Wow. You know what? I'm going to give it to my Stanley Cup goalie, Nikolai Habibulin.
Ooh. Wow.
That guy was underrated. So good.
Wow.
That's
one of the
awesome.
best teammates, too.
Awesome.
That is awesome. Yeah, it would have been easy. It would have been easy to pick a Patrick Waugh or a Marty Brodeur or this one or that one, but good on you. Good
I
on
think
you.
we're good. If we got those 5 guys in front of him, I don't think he has to do much.
They'll have the puck all night, no question about it.
Yeah.
Listen, Marty, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it, and thank you for offering to come on this with me.
Oh, anytime.
It's
This is great.
awesome.
I love talking hockey and with good people. So I appreciate you getting me on.
Well, thanks so much, and I wish you luck moving forward. No question.
You got it.
Thanks, Marty.
Be well, guys. Have a great
You
summer.
too.